Imagine the world tearing apart. Thunder cracks, seas rage, and giants clash with gods beneath a sky burning with fire and ash. This is Ragnarok, the last battle, the final fate. But this moment is not just chaos, it is the result of choices, betrayals, and sacrifices made since the very dawn of time. What looks like the end of everything is really the conclusion of a story that began long before, when the universe itself first opened. To understand why the gods fall and the world burns, we have to journey back to the very beginning, to the first sparks of creation and the rivalries that shaped all of existence. This battle of gods and giants may look like an ending, but it's not what you think, because every end is written in the beginning. If the first gods had not slain the primordial giant, the world as we know it would never have been formed, and neither humans nor gods would exist to face their destiny. If the Aesir and Vanir had not gone to war, mistrust would not have poisoned their bond, and Ragnarok itself might have unfolded differently. If Odin had not sacrificed for wisdom, the signs of doom would never have been known, and the gods would have marched blindly into their own destruction. In Norse myth, every act carries its cost, and if those choices had not been made, the final collapse, the breaking of sky, earth, and sea, would never arrive. Don't scroll past this. What you're about to hear will change how you see the end of the world. Stay till the end, because every secret of Ragnarok is hidden in the beginning. At the very dawn of time, before gods, before men, before even the memory of the world, there was only a gap, a vast, silent nothing, stretching endlessly in all directions. This void was called Ginnungagap. It was not darkness alone, but an emptiness so deep it seemed to swallow even the thought of light. Yet on either side of this yawning gulf, two powerful forces already existed, waiting to clash. To the north stood Niflheim, a realm of bitter frost, endless ice and mist that never lifted. It was a place where rivers froze before they reached the sea, where the air itself could turn breath into shards of frost. To the south blazed Muspelheim, a land of fire unbound. Rivers of molten rock roared across its surface, sparks leapt into the sky, and a heat brighter than the sun poured outward in waves. In the middle, where cold and heat met, Ginnungagap began to stir. From the collision of these extremes, something remarkable happened. The frost from Niflheim drifted into the void, where it met the burning winds of Muspelheim. As the ice melted, drops of water began to form, heavy and alive with strange power. From those drops, the first being was born. His name was Ymir, and he was no ordinary creature. Ymir was a giant, vast and terrible, larger than mountains, his body carrying the raw force of chaos. Wherever he lay, more life spilled forth from him. From the sweat under his arms, other giants emerged, fierce and wild, destined to fill the world with their restless energy. Even his legs gave birth to monstrous children, carrying the bloodline of chaos into eternity. Ymir was the ancestor of the race of giants, a people both powerful and dangerous who would forever stand in tension with the gods. Yet Ymir was not alone in Ginnungagap. From the same melting frost came another extraordinary creature, Audhumla, the cosmic cow. She was gentle and nurturing, yet vital to the birth of all things. Rivers of milk flowed from her, enough to feed Ymir and keep him alive. As she sustained him, she herself licked the salty ice of Ginnungagap. Each day her tongue scraped away more of the frozen wall, and something began to emerge from within it. First hair, then a face, and finally an entire figure. Buri, the first god. Buri was tall, strong, and filled with a power unlike the giants. He was the beginning of order, a force to counter Ymir's chaos. Buri had a son named Bor, and Bor took for his wife a giantess. From their union came 3 sons, Odin, Vili, and Ve. These brothers were unlike anything before them. Odin was wise, ever searching for knowledge. Vili was fierce, with a will that burned bright. Ve carried keen sight and a voice of command. Together, they were the first of the Aesir, the gods who would shape the destiny of the cosmos. But there was no room for gods in Ymir's world. The giant's enormous body and countless offspring filled the void, leaving little space for order or growth. So Odin and his brothers made a choice that would define everything that followed. They resolved to kill Ymir, the father of giants. Armed with courage and divine power, they attacked. A terrible battle shook Ginnungagap. Ymir fought with the strength of mountains, his roars echoing across the void. Yet the brothers pressed on, and in the end, they triumphed. Ymir fell, and from his wounds poured a flood so vast it drowned nearly all of his children. Only a single giant, Bergelmir, survived with his wife, carried away on a boat made of wood. From them the race of giants would continue, keeping alive the eternal rivalry between gods and their ancient foes. With Ymir dead, Odin, Vili, and Ve began the work of creation. They dragged his colossal body into the center of Ginnungagap, and piece by piece they remade it into the world. From his flesh they formed the land, solid and fertile. From his blood they made the seas, lakes and rivers. His bones rose as mountains, jagged and sharp, while his teeth and broken fragments of bone became the stones scattered across the earth. From his skull they lifted a great dome into the sky, and to hold it in place they set 4 dwarves at the corners of the world: Nordri, Sudri, Ostri, and Vestri. Their names became the directions north, south, east, and west. The dome of the sky curved over the new world, vast and protective, yet empty still. To bring light, the brothers reached into Muspelheim and caught the sparks that flew from its flames. They flung them into the sky, where they burned as stars scattered across the heavens. The largest of these became the sun and moon, each set upon its endless path, chased by wolves who would one day catch them at the end of all things. With light and shadow, the rhythm of day and night began, and time itself was born. Yet the world, though beautiful, was still silent and empty. It needed life. Along the shores of this new earth, the brothers found 2 pieces of driftwood, shaped by the sea but lifeless. One was ash, the other elm. They shaped them carefully, and each god gave a gift. Odin breathed into them the gift of life itself. Vili gave them thought, mind, and emotion. Ve bestowed speech, hearing, and sight. Thus were born Ask and Embla, the first man and woman. From them all humanity would descend, walking the lands the gods had crafted from the body of the giant, but the gods' work was not yet complete. Above all creation they raised Yggdrasil, the great world tree, vast beyond comprehension. Its roots reached into the deepest places of existence. Its branches touched the heavens, and its trunk held together every realm. Around its roots and branches creatures stirred. An eagle sat high above watching all, a serpent gnawed below, and a squirrel raced up and down carrying news and insults between them. Yggdrasil was not just a tree, it was the spine of the cosmos, binding together 9 worlds, each with its own wonders, dangers, and peoples. As long as Yggdrasil stood, the universe held its fragile balance. So from fire and ice, from chaos and sacrifice, the cosmos was born. From the corpse of a slain giant came mountains and seas. From sparks of flame came stars and time. From driftwood came man and woman. And from the roots of the world tree spread the 9 realms that would host the stories of gods, giants, dwarves, elves, and men. All of it was built on the decision of 3 brothers who chose order over chaos, who carved a world from death so that life could grow. It was an act of creation drenched in violence, yet also filled with promise. For in the Norse, cosmos, creation, and destruction are never separate. They are bound together, each giving birth to the other. The blood of Ymir did not just drown his children, it became the rivers that fed the land. The skull that once held chaos became the sky that shelters life. The driftwood that once floated uselessly became the ancestors of humanity. Even the world tree, so mighty and eternal, carries tension in its roots, for serpents gnaw at it even as it binds the realms together. Nothing created is safe, and nothing born can escape the cycles of death and renewal. From that moment forward, the stage was set. Gods had risen, giants had survived, men had been given life, and the cosmos stood in balance. Yet within that balance already lurked the seeds of its undoing, for Ymir's children lived on, hating the gods for their father's death. The wolves chased the sun and moon, waiting for the day they would finally catch them. And even Odin himself knew that the world, born in fire and ice, would one day end in fire and ice again. With the world shaped from the body of the first giant and humanity breathing for the first time, the cosmos was no longer an empty shell. But the gods knew their creation was not a single land. It was a network of realms, woven together by Yggdrasil, the mighty world tree. Its roots dug deep into hidden places, and its branches stretched into the farthest heights, holding 9 worlds in their embrace. Each realm was unique, a reflection of fire or ice, chaos or harmony, and every one of them played its part in the story of gods, giants and men. At the highest branches stood Asgard, the realm of the Aesir gods. It gleamed with golden halls and towering palaces, a place of majesty and strength. Here, Odin sat upon his high throne, overlooking the worlds with a single, all-seeing eye, always searching for wisdom. Thor, his son, stood ready with his hammer, sworn to protect both gods and men from the threats of giants. Frigg, Odin's queen, was revered for her wisdom and foresight, weaving threads of fate in silence. Heimdall, the ever-watchful guardian, kept his gaze on the shimmering bridge of Bifrost, ready to sound his horn at the first sign of doom. Asgard was not just a home. It was a fortress, a symbol of divine order in a universe always on the edge of chaos. Below Asgard lay Midgard, the world of men. Midgard was vast, filled with snow-tipped mountains, endless forests, fertile fields, and wide seas. It was both beautiful and dangerous, for humans lived always under the watchful gaze of their gods. Farmers tended their crops, warriors sharpened their swords, families gathered around hearthfires, telling stories of Odin's wisdom and Thor's battles. But Midgard was not safe. Monsters and serpents lurked in its seas, storms could strike without warning, and giants often tested its borders. Still, humans endured, courageous and stubborn, for they knew they were part of the gods' great design. The shimmering rainbow bridge connected Midgard to Asgard, a reminder that men were never truly alone, always under the protection and judgment of their divine rulers. Beyond the familiar lands of men stretched Jotunheim, the realm of giants. Harsh and unforgiving, it was a wilderness of jagged mountains, frozen valleys, and storm-swept cliffs. The giants who dwelled there were immense and powerful, descended from Ymir himself. They were enemies of the gods, yet not without wisdom. Some were tricksters, others were seers, and a few even formed uneasy alliances or marriages with the gods. But most stood as rivals, their strength and cunning always threatening the fragile balance of creation. Odin himself knew that the giants could not be dismissed, for from their land came both peril and prophecy. High among the branches of Yggdrasil was Alfheim, the home of the Light Elves. It was a place of radiant beauty, glowing with soft light and filled with forests, rivers, and meadows, untouched by shadow. The elves who lived there were graceful, tall, and shimmering with magic. They were healers, artists, and makers of wonders, bringing peace and harmony wherever they walked. Ruled by the god Freyr, Alfheim stood as a realm of gentleness, a counterbalance to the harshness of Jotunheim and the fire of Muspelheim. To the Vikings, the elves were beings of awe, both inspiring and mysterious, forever linked with the unseen, a beauty of nature. Deep beneath the earth lay Svartalfheim, or Nidavellir, the realm of the dwarves. Unlike the shining light of Alfheim, this world was dark, filled with endless tunnels, glowing forges, and the ringing of hammers striking metal. The dwarves were master craftsmen, unmatched in their skill. From their forges came Thor's mighty hammer, Mjolnir, Odin's spear, Gungnir, and countless treasures of gods and heroes. They lived in shadow, but their work lit the world. Stubborn and secretive, the dwarves rarely revealed their ways. Yet, their creations shaped the fate of the gods themselves. To the west lay Vanaheim, the land of the Vanir gods. Unlike the warrior Aesir of Asgard, the Vanir were masters of fertility, magic, and prophecy. Their realm was green and fertile, filled with rivers, forests, and endless summer fields. Freyr, Freya, and Njord called this place home, their powers, tied to the cycles of life and nature. Once, the Aesir and Vanir had been enemies, but after a long and bitter war, they exchanged hostages and made peace, binding their realms together. From then on, the wisdom of Vanaheim enriched Asgard, and the strength of Asgard protected Vanaheim. Far below the surface stretched Helheim, the underworld of the dead. Ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki, it was a place of silence and shadow. Unlike Valhalla, where warriors feasted and trained for Ragnarok, Helheim was a quiet realm for those who died ordinary deaths. Farmers, children, elders, and all who had not fallen in battle. Its fields were cold and misty, its rivers black, and its walls high and impenetrable. Hel herself was half beautiful and half dead, her face split between life and decay. She ruled calmly, without malice, but without mercy. To the living, Helheim was a reminder that death was not always glorious, and that most would find eternity in silence rather than song. At the edges of the cosmos stood two realms of extremes. To the far north was Niflheim, the land of ice and shadow, where glaciers towered and rivers of poison flowed. From its waters had come Ymir, the first giant, and even after creation, Niflheim remained a place of deathly cold and danger. To the far south burned Muspelheim, the land of eternal fire, where flames leapt into the sky and rivers of lava carved the land. Here dwelled Surtur, the fire giant with a sword brighter than the sun, waiting for the day of Ragnarok when he would rise to burn the world. Ice and fire, opposites locked in eternal tension, stood as the outer boundaries of existence, reminding gods and men alike of the forces that had birthed the cosmos and would one day end it. All these realms, 9 in total, were bound together by Yggdrasil, the great ash tree whose roots and branches touched every world. It was the spine of creation, eternal and alive, yet always in peril. Serpents gnawed at its roots, creatures whispered along its trunk, and an eagle kept watch from its highest branches. Yggdrasil was both strong and fragile, a reflection of the cosmos itself. As long as it stood, the 9 worlds endured. But if it ever fell, everything, gods, men, giants, elves, and dwarves, would fall with it. Thus, the cosmos was not a single world, but a living system, balanced between fire and ice, light and dark, life and death. From the shining halls of Asgard to the silent fields of Helheim, from the radiant forests of Alfheim to the burning rivers of Muspelheim, each realm played its part. Together, they formed the stage upon which every saga of Norse myth would unfold. Tales of courage, betrayal, wisdom, and fate, all bound within the branches of a single eternal tree. Long before the world trembled with the first whispers of Ragnarok, a different war nearly tore the heavens apart. It was not fought between gods and giants, nor between men and monsters, but among the gods themselves. At the heart of this conflict stood two great clans, the Aesir of Asgard and the Vanir of Vanaheim. Though both were divine, they could not have been more different. The Aesir thrived on strength, battle, and honor. Odin, Thor, and Tyr embodied the warrior spirit, ruling through might and the pursuit of victory. The Vanir, on the other hand, were masters of fertility, magic, and prophecy. Freya, and Njord carried powers that nurtured the earth, guided the winds, and saw into the hidden patterns of fate. In the beginning, they lived apart, each ruling their own domain. But suspicion and pride soon drew them into conflict, and the 9 realms shook under the weight of their war. The seeds of strife were sown with the arrival of a woman in Asgard. Her name was Gullveig, a Vanir goddess of beauty and enchantment, gifted in the deep arts of Seder magic. She dazzled the Aesir with her power, her ability to foresee destiny and bend reality. For a time she was welcomed into their halls, her presence stirring fascination and wonder. But fascination quickly turned to fear. The Aesir, proud of their strength, mistrusted such power, for Seder was subtle and strange, able to unravel even the strongest walls or twist the firmest wills. In their suspicion, they struck against her. Gullveig was seized, and 3 times they cast her into the fire, trying to destroy her. Yet each time she rose again from the ashes, alive and shining, reborn brighter than before. To the Aesir, she was an unkillable threat. To the Vanir, her mistreatment was an unforgivable insult. News of Gullveig's burning spread swiftly across the realms, reaching Vanaheim. Outrage erupted among the Vanir gods. They saw her suffering as a betrayal of divine hospitality, a crime against one of their own. They demanded compensation, but the Aesir refused. Pride clashed with pride, and peace shattered. The Vanir gathered their magic and their warriors, while the Aesir prepared their weapons and armies. The first war among the gods had begun. When battle erupted, the skies roared with thunder, and the earth split beneath their feet. The Aesir charged with spears, swords, and hammers, their war cries echoing through the halls of Asgard. Thor hurled lightning, and Odin himself led with Gungnir, his unstoppable spear. The Vanir, however, fought differently. They wove illusions and enchantments that clouded their enemies' minds, conjured storms that turned against the Aesir, and bound their weapons with unseen power. Fields withered or flourished at their command, rivers rose or dried at a word, and the very earth seemed to fight on their side. Where the Aesir brought brute strength, the Vanir brought subtle sorcery. The clash of these two powers shook Yggdrasil itself. For years the war dragged on, neither side able to claim victory. The Aesir could not overwhelm the Vanir's magic, and the Vanir could not break the Aesir's sheer force. Battles burned forests, toppled mountains, and filled rivers with blood. Entire realms trembled at their fury, and even giants watched in awe at the devastation the gods brought upon themselves. The war became a lesson. Might without wisdom could not conquer, and wisdom without strength could not prevail. Eventually, both sides wearied of endless struggle. The war had proven only that each clan's power balanced the other. Neither could destroy the other without risking the end of the cosmos itself. So, they came together to negotiate peace. On neutral ground, the Aesir and Vanir gathered, weary yet proud, and forged a treaty. To seal the agreement, they performed an ancient ritual. Each spat into a great vessel, and from the mingled spit, the gods created a man named Kvasir, a being of unmatched wisdom and knowledge, who would travel the realms spreading peace and truth. This act symbolized unity, the blending of their powers into something greater than either side alone. But the treaty demanded more than ritual. To guarantee peace, both clans exchanged hostages, sending some of their finest gods to live among the other. From Vanaheim came Njord, the god of seas and winds, and his twin children Freya and Freya. Njord's wisdom calmed storms, guiding sailors safely home, while Freya's blessings of fertility and prosperity enriched the fields of Midgard. Freya, goddess of beauty and powerful magic, captivated Asgard itself. She taught the Aesir the secrets of Seder, the very magic they had once feared, and even Odin, ever hungry for wisdom, learned from her. In return, the Aesir sent their own to Vanaheim, symbolically binding their realms together in trust. The exchange transformed both clans. The Aesir grew wiser, learning the ways of prophecy and magic. The Vanir gained strength, adopting the directness and courage of the Aesir. From then on, the two families of gods were no longer enemies but allies, joined in purpose even as they kept their distinct natures. Together, they would rule over the 9 realms, balancing war and peace, might and magic, courage and foresight. The war that once threatened to destroy the gods instead reshaped them, forging a stronger pantheon than before. Yet, the scars of that conflict never fully faded. The memory of Gulve's burning, the mistrust of strange magic, and the fragile threads of peace lingered beneath the surface. The Aesir and Vanir had joined hands, but the tensions between them remained part of the cosmos. That tension became a reminder of the delicate balance upon which all creation rested. Unity had been born from strife, but it carried within it the seed of future discord, and so the war of the gods ended not with triumph, but with wisdom. It was a lesson carved into the very fabric of Norse myth, that no single power, whether brute force or subtle magic, can rule alone. It is only in their union that balance is found. From that day forward, Asgard's shining halls echoed not only with the clash of weapons, but with the whispers of prophecy, the weaving of spells, and the quiet wisdom of the Vanir. Vanaheim, in turn, learned the strength of honor, courage, and steel. The war had threatened to break the world apart, but instead it bound the divine realms together, preparing them for the greater trials yet to come. For though peace reigned for a time, the gods knew that unity would be tested again. The giants still stirred in Jotunheim, shadows lengthened in Helheim, and prophecies whispered of an end that even the strongest treaty could not prevent. The war between Aesir and Vanir had ended in peace, but it had also reminded them of a darker truth. Conflict was woven into the cosmos itself, and no truce, no matter how sacred, could last forever. Among all the gods of Asgard, none carried the weight of knowledge and fate like Odin, the All-Father. He was not only a ruler, but a wanderer, a seeker who believed that true strength did not lie in brute force alone. Thor could smash mountains with his hammer, and Tyr could stand unbroken in the chaos of war, but Odin understood something deeper, that the greatest weapon was wisdom, and the sharpest edge was foresight. He knew that battles could be won by steel and courage, but the war against fate could only be fought with knowledge. From the very beginning, Odin dedicated himself to a path of sacrifice and discovery, trading comfort for secrets and even giving up parts of himself to peer into the mysteries of existence. One of the greatest treasures he sought was the wisdom of Mimir's well. This was no ordinary spring. It lay deep at the roots of Yggdrasil, where the world tree drew its strength. The waters of this well held truths older than gods or men, truths about destiny, cycles, and the hidden laws of the cosmos. Guarding the well was Mimir, a being renowned for his vast knowledge, a keeper of secrets so profound that even Odin, in all his cunning, could not unlock them without help. When Odin arrived at the well, he asked for a single drink, knowing it would grant him wisdom beyond measure. But Mimir demanded a price. Nothing so powerful could be given freely. Odin would have to pay with something precious, something irreplaceable. And so, without hesitation, Odin plucked out one of his own eyes and cast it into the dark water. In exchange, he drank, and visions filled his mind, visions of past, present, and future. From that moment on, Odin saw more clearly with one eye than others ever could with two. His empty socket was not a weakness, but a mark of sacrifice, a reminder that knowledge is never without cost. But Mimir's well was not the end of Odin's search. There was another source of wisdom, hidden not in water, but in symbols. These were the runes, ancient markings filled with magical power. They were not simply letters, but keys to shaping reality itself. Symbols that could heal wounds, curse enemies, bind fates, and unlock mysteries. Yet the runes did not reveal themselves to just anyone. To grasp their meaning, Odin knew he would have to give more than an eye. He would have to give himself. He climbed Yggdrasil, the tree that held the 9 realms together, and there he pierced himself with his spear, hanging suspended between life and death. For 9 days and 9 nights he endured hunger, thirst, and pain, staring into the abyss. He hovered on the edge of existence, refusing help, refusing to relent. At the end of the 9th night, just as his strength was fading completely, the runes revealed themselves. They glowed before him, whispering their secrets, and in that moment Odin seized their power. When he fell back to the earth, broken but alive, he carried with him knowledge that no god had possessed before. He had learned that true mastery comes not from possession, but from sacrifice, and that wisdom demanded endurance beyond mortal or divine limits. With the runes at his command, Odin became more than a warrior king. He became a master of magic, and words, able to shape outcomes not by strength alone, but by weaving destiny itself. Yet even with this new power, his hunger for knowledge did not cease. He sent his ravens, Hugin and Munin, thought and memory, out into the world. Each morning they soared across the 9 realms, gathering secrets, watching kings, whispering of betrayals, wars and prophecies. At evening they returned, perching on Odin's shoulders to tell him all they had seen. Through them, Odin's reach extended. Everywhere, his ears opened to whispers in the halls of men and the plots of giants alike. No secret was safe from him, no scheme too small to escape his notice. He was always listening, always watching, for he knew that even the smallest spark could ignite the fire that would end the world. At his side also walked 2 wolves, Geri and Freki, loyal companions who shared his meals and guarded him with ferocity. They were more than animals. They were symbols of his relentless nature, ever hungry, ever watchful, never resting. To Odin, the world was not a place of comfort, but a battlefield of ideas and destinies. Every journey, every companion, every sacrifice was another tool in his endless preparation for what he knew was coming. Ragnarok, the day when gods and giants would meet in their final battle. Odin's wisdom was not without burden, for in his visions he had seen his own death swallowed by the monstrous wolf Fenrir. He had seen Thor locked in battle with the Midgard serpent, destined to strike it down, but fall to its venom. He had seen flames devour the earth, oceans swallow the sky, and Yggdrasil tremble as the 9 worlds collapsed into silence. This knowledge did not free him. It haunted him, but Odin did not despair. Instead, he gathered every secret, every spell, every weapon he could find, determined to strengthen the gods and prepare for the day fate would strike. He wandered the world disguised as a traveler, cloaked and hooded, staff in hand. Sometimes he gave wisdom to those who proved worthy. Other times he tested men, kings, and even giants, using riddles and words as weapons sharper than any blade. Through these wanderings, Odin reminded the world that power without wisdom was hollow, and that every choice carried its weight in the tapestry of fate. Odin's relentless quest for knowledge shaped Asgard itself. His insights guided the Aesir, in war and peace, in forging alliances and anticipating betrayals. Through his sacrifices, the gods learned to respect both courage and cunning, both steel and cedar. Even those who doubted him could not deny that his vision, costly though it was, gave them the best chance against the storms to come. For Odin was not preparing only for the present, he was preparing for the end. He carried the heavy truth that fate could not be fully avoided, only delayed, only met with courage and wisdom when the hour struck. Thus Odin stood apart from all others. He was a god with one eye, yet he saw more than anyone else. He bore scars of self-inflicted wounds, yet those scars were his greatest treasures. He carried ravens on his shoulders, wolves at his side, and runes carved into his mind, each a symbol of the lengths he had gone for knowledge. He was feared, respected, and sometimes mistrusted, for wisdom made him cunning and cunning made him dangerous. But above all, Odin was driven by necessity. He knew that the final battle loomed closer with each passing age, and that every secret might mean the difference between survival and annihilation. And so, the All-Father never rested. His one eye gazed toward the future. His mind weighed every possibility, and his heart carried the burden of a fate he could not escape. He sacrificed pieces of himself so that others might stand stronger when the day of doom arrived. Odin's quest was not just for himself, it was for all of Asgard, for Midgard, for the 9 realms tied together by Yggdrasil. His story was a reminder that wisdom is never free, that power must be earned, and that even gods must bleed to hold the knowledge that shapes destiny. If Odin was the god of wisdom and sacrifice, then Thor was the god of strength and action. Where Odin searched for hidden truths, Thor met danger head-on, swinging his hammer with fury and courage. He was the defender of Asgard and Midgard alike, a god of thunder whose footsteps shook the mountains and whose roar echoed with the crash of storms. Among the people of Midgard, Thor was beloved. Farmers prayed for his protection, warriors called on his strength, and travelers asked him to drive away the giants and monsters that lurked beyond their villages. He was not always patient, not always calm, but he was dependable. When enemies rose, Thor came swiftly, and when his hammer fell, few could stand against it. Thor's might came not only from his fiery spirit, but from the weapon he carried. Forged by dwarves in the shadowy halls of Svartalfheim, his hammer Mjolnir was the most fearsome weapon in the 9 realms. It could crush mountains, summon thunder, and blaze with lightning. Whenever Thor threw it, the hammer always returned. To his hand, guided by magic, no enemy could break. Around his waist, he wore Meging Jord, a belt that doubled his strength, making him nearly unstoppable. To the giants of Jotunheim, Thor was terror itself, a storm made flesh ever ready to strike. But to humans, he was hope, the shield against chaos. He embodied not the cunning of Odin, but the raw, fearless will to protect. One of the most famous tales of Thor's battles was his duel with Hrungnir, one of the strongest giants in Jotunheim. Hrungnir boasted loudly that he was greater than any god, and that not even Thor could defeat him. The gods grew weary of his arrogance, and Thor himself challenged him to fight. Hrungnir armed himself with a shield of stone and a weapon of solid rock, but even his might could not match the thunder god. Thor hurled Mjolnir across the battlefield. The giant's weapon shattered into fragments, and the hammer struck Hrungnir squarely, killing him instantly. Yet even in victory, Thor felt the sting of consequence. A shard of stone lodged itself in his head, a reminder that even the greatest victories carried scars. Still, the giants learned what they already feared, that Thor's hammer could not be stopped, and that the protector of Asgard would never yield. Not all of Thor's tales were grim or bloody. Some carried humor, showing that even the strongest god could be caught in absurd situations. One day Thor awoke to find Mjolnir missing. His rage shook the halls of Asgard, for without his hammer, neither gods nor humans were safe. Loki discovered the thief, a giant named Thrym, who demanded that Freya, the goddess of beauty, be given to him as a bride in exchange for the hammer's return. Outraged, Freya refused. The gods gathered in despair until Loki devised a bold and ridiculous plan. Thor himself would disguise as Freya, wearing a bridal gown and veil, while Loki dressed as his bridesmaid. At first, Thor protested, furious at the humiliation, but with no other choice, he agreed. Thus, Thor, disguised as a bride, was led into Jotunheim to meet Thrym. The wedding feast was filled with suspicion, for Thor's appetite was monstrous. He devoured whole animals and drank barrels of mead. When Thrym questioned his strange behavior, Loki quickly lied, saying that the bride had not eaten in days, so eager was she for this union. Later, when Thrym lifted the veil and saw Thor's burning eyes, Loki explained that the bride had not slept in 8 nights, so longing was she for the wedding night. Deceived, the giant was satisfied, and at last he called for Mjolnir to be placed in the bride's lap to bless the marriage. The moment the hammer touched Thor's hands, the disguise ended. With a thunderous laugh, Thor threw off the veil, raised Mjolnir high, and struck down Thrym, and all the giants gathered. The gods rejoiced, and Thor returned victorious, his hammer once more at his side. This story was retold not only as comedy, but as reassurance. No matter the trickery of giants, Thor would always prevail. Yet beneath the laughter and triumphs lay the shadow of Thor's greatest enemy, Jörmungandr, the Midgard serpent. This monstrous snake, child of Loki, encircled the world itself beneath the sea, so vast that it could bite its own tail. Thor and the serpent clashed more than once, each encounter shaking the earth. In one tale, Thor went fishing with the giant Hymir. He baited his line with the head of an ox and cast it into the ocean. The waters churned, and when he pulled the line taut, he realized he had hooked Jörmungandr. With all his strength, Thor hauled the serpent up, its coils rising from the deep, its venom dripping into the sea. The sight was terrifying, yet Thor readied Mjolnir to strike. Ymir, terrified of the serpent's power, cut the line before the hammer could fall, and Jörmungandr slipped back into the depths. Thor raged, knowing their battle was far from finished. Prophecy promised that they would meet again at Ragnarok, and though Thor would kill the serpent's venom would kill him as well. Their destinies were bound together, fated to end each other in the final hour. Thor's adventures, whether comic, tragic, or heroic, defined him not just as a warrior, but as a guardian. He fought giants who threatened Asgard, monsters who haunted Midgard, and enemies who tested the balance of the cosmos. Where Odin prepared for the future with knowledge, Thor ensured the present was secure with his strength. His hammer was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of protection, of courage, of loyalty. Farmers saw his storms as blessings for their fields. Warriors saw his thunder as a call to battle, and children grew up hearing stories of his victories. Thor was not flawless. He was quick-tempered, stubborn, sometimes foolish. Yet in his flaws lay his humanity, making him beloved by gods and mortals alike. For the people of Midgard, Thor embodied what they valued most: bravery in the face of danger, loyalty to family and kin, and the will to fight for what must be defended. He was not cunning like Odin or graceful like Freya, but he was steadfast. His hammer never failed, his arm never faltered, and his heart never wavered. Even when prophecy promised his death, Thor did not shrink from his fate. Instead, he carried it proudly, ready to face the serpent when the time came, knowing his sacrifice would protect the worlds he loved. In Thor, the Vikings saw themselves. He was not distant, mysterious, or cold. He was fierce and flawed, powerful yet approachable, a god who fought not for glory alone, but for the survival of gods and men. His battles against giants, his humiliating disguise as a bride, his endless feud with the serpent, all of these tales captured the spirit of courage and defiance that the Norse valued. Through Thor, They remembered that even when doom was certain, one must fight with all the strength of storm and thunder. The gods were not the only figures who filled the Norse cosmos with deeds of courage and tales of tragedy. Alongside them stood mortals whose bravery, cunning, and flaws carved legends that echoed across the centuries. These heroes, though born of flesh and blood, often walked paths as grand as the gods themselves. Their lives burned brightly with quests, battles, and doomed loves, and in their stories, the people of Midgard saw the ideals they cherished most: honor, loyalty, and the relentless pursuit of glory, even when fate promised ruin. Among them, few names shone brighter than Sigurd, the slayer of dragons, and Ragnar, the daring king whose legend blurred the line between history and myth. Sigurd's story began not with triumph, but with a curse. Long ago, a hoard of treasure came into the hands of a dwarf named Fafnir. Consumed by greed, Fafnir turned on his kin, killed his father, and transformed into a monstrous dragon to guard the gold. The treasure was vast, glittering with jewels, weapons, and a ring, whose curse doomed all who possessed it. To slay the dragon and seize this wealth became the great quest of Sigurd, a young man raised by a blacksmith and destined for more than the life of a warrior. With guidance and craft, he forged a sword strong enough to cut through stone. Armed with this blade, he dug a trench near the path of the dragon. As Fafnir slithered across the land, scales scraping the earth and poison dripping from his fangs, Sigurd lay in wait. When the massive body passed overhead, he thrust his sword upward, with all his might piercing the dragon's heart. The beast roared, shaking the ground, but death claimed it at last. In victory, however, Sigurd sealed his own doom. The dragon's blood, flowing over his skin, gave him the power to understand the language of birds. Their voices warned him of betrayal, that the blacksmith who had guided him planned to kill him for the treasure. Sigurd struck first, ending the plot. Yet even more dangerous than treachery was the cursed ring he claimed from the hoard. It promised doom and sorrow, and though Sigurd gained riches, he lost peace. He fell in love with Brynhild, a shield maiden, a fierce spirit and fiery will, but deceit and the curse of the treasure tore them apart. Tricked into marrying another, Sigurd broke Brynhild's heart, and jealousy soon led to betrayal and his death. The dragon slayer, who seemed invincible, fell not to a beast's claws, but to the curse of greed and the frailty of love. His tale became a warning as much as an inspiration, showing that even the greatest heroes could not escape fate's cruel hand. Another figure who lived on in saga and song was Ragnar Lothbrok. He was a warrior and king whose name carried terror across the seas. Where Sigurd's tale was woven with myth, Ragnar's was rooted in both history and legend, a story carried by poets and chroniclers alike. He was remembered for his cunning and boldness, for battles fought against kingdoms and beasts alike. One tale told how Ragnar faced a serpent that guarded the maiden Thora. To defeat the monster, he crafted armor coated in tar and sand so the beast's venom would not touch his skin. With spear in hand, Ragnar slew the serpent, claiming both victory and Thora's hand. From such deeds his fame spread, and his exploits became countless, raiding coasts, defying kings, and carving out power with blade and fire. Yet like so many Norse heroes, Ragnar too met a tragic fate. Captured by his enemies, he was thrown into a pit of serpents, where he died defiantly, singing of his deeds and boasting that his sons would avenge him. His voice carried the spirit of the Viking age, fearless in life, unbroken in death. These heroes, though mortal, carried the same values that drove the gods. They lived for honor, embraced danger, and faced death with courage. For the people who told these stories, heroes were mirrors of themselves, proof that glory was not reserved for divine beings alone. To die bravely was to achieve immortality, whether through memory, song, or the promise of an afterlife. For the Norse did not see death as an end, but as a passage, and the afterlife reflected the worth of one's life. The greatest reward awaited those who fell in battle, for the Valkyries, fierce maidens of Odin, swept over the fields of the slain to choose the bravest. These chosen warriors were carried to Valhalla, the hall of the slain, where Odin ruled. There, the fallen fought each day in endless combat, testing their strength and honing their skill. At night, their wounds healed, and they feasted together on endless meat and mead, celebrating victories and preparing for the day of Ragnarok, when they would ride forth at Odin's side. Valhalla was not a paradise of rest, but of eternal struggle, a place where warriors could live out their greatest passion forever. Yet Valhalla was not the only hall of the honored dead. Freya, goddess of love, beauty, and magic, welcomed half of the fallen into her realm, Folkvangr. Her fields were green, her halls shining, a place of peace and beauty compared to the endless battle of Valhalla. Here, warriors lived in harmony, enjoying calm after the storm of life. To die bravely meant not only the chance of endless glory, but also the chance of eternal peace, and both were considered honors worthy of envy. For those who did not fall in battle, however, the afterlife was different. Many souls drifted to Helheim, ruled by Hel, daughter of Loki. It was not a place of torment, but of silence, shadow, and stillness. Those who lived ordinary lives or died from sickness or age found themselves there, wandering forever in a realm neither cruel nor joyful. It was a fate without song or celebration, a reminder that glory belonged to those who dared to risk everything. These beliefs shaped the hearts of the Vikings. To live bravely was to live well, and to die with honor was to achieve immortality. Around fires and in halls, men and women heard the stories of Sigurd and Ragnar, of heroes who faced monsters, curses, and kings. They learned that courage brought glory, that greed brought ruin, and that death in battle was not an end, but a beginning. Even in tragedy, these heroes stood as examples, their names carried forward through song, their deeds woven into the very fabric of Norse culture. To be remembered was to live forever, and the stories of heroes ensured that memory never died. In the end, the sagas of mortals and the promises of the afterlife tied humanity to the gods. Just as Odin sacrificed for wisdom and Thor fought against giants, mortals too could carve their mark upon the world through courage. The halls of Valhalla and Folkvangr awaited, offering eternal reward to those who embraced honor. Even Helheim, quiet and cold, reminded the living that life was fleeting, and that deeds, not years, measured a person's worth. The Norse saw the world as a stage where gods and men alike battled fate, and in that battle, death was never the enemy, cowardice was. In the shining halls of Asgard, where gods feasted and laughter filled the air, there was one among them who stood apart, not for power or cunning, but for beauty and kindness. His name was Baldur, son of Odin and Frigg, and he was beloved above all others. Wherever he walked, joy followed. His smile could calm tempests, his presence lifted sorrow from hearts, and even the sternest warrior softened in his company. To mortals, he was the light of the gods, a symbol of purity and hope. To the Aesir, he was the brother they cherished most, the one who brought harmony to their golden realm. But even the brightest flame casts a shadow, and in the story of Baldur, light would give way to darkness. One night, Baldur was troubled by dreams. They came not as gentle visions, but as shadows of doom, dreams of pain, of death, of a fate that no laughter could dispel. He awoke shaken, and though he said little, Frigg, his mother, knew her son well. She too felt the stirrings of destiny, and her heart trembled at the thought of losing him. Determined to shield Baldur from harm, she travelled across the 9 realms, seeking oaths from all things that lived or breathed or grew. Fire swore it would not burn him, water promised it would not drown him. Stones, metals, plants, beasts, all vowed never to harm Baldur. She even spoke to sickness and poison, binding them by her love. Every being agreed, for who could wish harm on one so beloved? And so, through her efforts, Balder became invulnerable, untouched by blade or flame, immune to hunger or disease. The gods rejoiced in this miracle. To test his new invincibility, they gathered in the meadows of Asgard, laughing as they hurled spears, stones, and arrows at him. Each weapon bounced away harmlessly. Flames refused to singe his skin, waters rolled off him like dew, even lightning bent aside. Balder stood among them smiling, unharmed, as their game grew wilder. It was a spectacle of joy, a celebration of his perfection. But not all who watched were filled with laughter. Loki, the trickster, the shapeshifter, the one who delighted in disruption, sat silently, envy burning in his heart. He could not bear to see such light unmarred, such joy unbroken. For Loki's nature was not to preserve harmony, but to shatter it, to find the flaw in perfection and twist it until it cracked. Disguised as an old woman, Loki sought out Frigg, who sat watching the gods play their harmless game. With gentle words and feigned curiosity, he asked her how it was that Baldur could not be harmed. Proud of her success, she revealed what she had done, how she had secured promises from all things, except one. There was a small plant, she explained, a simple sprig of mistletoe, too young, too harmless to worry about. Loki's eyes gleamed with dark delight. In that moment, he had found the key to break Asgard's joy. He fashioned a dart from mistletoe, slender and sharp. Then he approached Hoder, Baldur's blind brother, who stood apart from the game, saddened that he could not join in throwing weapons. Loki spoke softly to him, offering help. "Why not join your brothers?" he said. "I will guide your hand, so you too can share in the sport." Grateful, Hoder agreed, never suspecting the trick. Loki placed the mistletoe dart in his hand and aimed his throw. With a gentle push, the dart flew, striking Balder in the chest. Silence fell. Where once there had been laughter, now there was horror. Balder staggered, eyes wide, and collapsed. The god of light, the joy of Asgard, lay lifeless on the ground. No blade had pierced him, no fire consumed him, yet he was dead. The gods rushed to his side, crying out in disbelief, but nothing could revive him. Odin's heart broke with grief, and Frigg wept as though the 9 realms themselves had fallen apart. Even the mountains mourned, even the earth grew still. All of Asgard was plunged into sorrow. The gods could not accept this loss. They resolved to send Hermod, Odin's son, to plead with Hel, ruler of the underworld, for Balder's return. Riding Odin's mighty steed, Sleipnir, Hermod journeyed for 9 nights through dark valleys and shadowed roads until he reached Hel's throne. There he begged for mercy, asking that Balder be restored to the living. Hel, half beautiful and half decayed, listened in silence. At last, she gave her answer. Balder could return, she said, but only if every creature in the 9 realms wept for him, proving that his loss was mourned by all creation. The gods sent messengers across the worlds. Giants wept, dwarves wept, elves and men, and even stones. I shed tears of grief. Rivers ran with sorrow, trees bowed in mourning, and beasts howled their lament. It seemed all creation grieved for Balder. All but one. In a cave sat a giantess named Thok, who refused to weep. Coldly she declared that Balder's fate meant nothing to her, that Hel should keep him. With her refusal, the bargain was broken. What no one realized was that Thok was Loki in disguise, once again ensuring Baldur's doom. The gods' grief turned to rage. They hunted Loki, who fled into the mountains, changing shape again and again to escape. He became a fish, slipping into rivers, but the gods caught him in a net. They bound him in chains deep underground, tying him to rocks with cords made from his own son's entrails. Above his head they placed a serpent whose venom dripped onto his face, burning him with agony. Loki's wife, Sigyn, tried to catch the venom in a bowl, but whenever she emptied it, drops struck Loki, and he writhed in pain, shaking the earth. Bound in torment, Loki's hatred only grew, and he swore vengeance when he was free. The death of Baldur was more than tragedy. It was a turning point, a wound that never healed. The gods understood that his fall was not just the loss of one beloved son, but a sign. For the prophecies had long said that Ragnarok would begin when Baldur died. The laughter of Asgard faded, replaced by fear and suspicion. They no longer trusted each other as before. Odin searched more desperately for knowledge, trying to delay the inevitable. Thor prepared for battles he knew must come. Even the mortals of Midgard felt the change. As storms grew harsher and omens darker, Baldur had been the symbol of light, of hope, of innocence. With his death, those things were lost. In their place came sorrow, betrayal, and dread. The gods still ruled, still feasted, still fought their enemies, but the shadow of doom lay heavy over them. They knew that Ragnarok was no longer a distant prophecy. It was coming swiftly, an unstoppable tide that would sweep away gods and men alike. And so the tragedy of Baldur became the prelude to the end of all things. His death marked the beginning of the unraveling. His absence left a void no joy could fill. And his memory haunted Asgard, reminding them that no oath, no magic, no power could halt fate once it had begun its march. The death of Baldur was the first crack in the golden walls of Asgard, the wound that warned of what was to come. From that moment, the gods lived under the shadow of a prophecy too heavy to ignore. Ragnarok, the doom of the gods, the destruction of the cosmos, was no longer a distant whisper. It was a certainty. Signs crept across the 9 realms like gathering storm clouds, each one another drumbeat in the march toward the end. The first sign was the Fimbul winter, a winter unlike any other. 3 long years it stretched, with no summer between, only endless snow and biting winds. Crops failed, herds starved, rivers froze solid, and men turned on each other for survival. Brothers killed brothers, fathers betrayed sons, kinship dissolved. Into violence, the bonds that held society together broke, leaving only bloodshed. This was not simply weather, it was fate eroding the order of the world. Even the strongest warriors could not fight hunger, and so chaos spread across Midgard. Then the earth itself began to tremble. The roots of Yggdrasil groaned as if in pain, and mountains split open. From the depths, the monstrous wolf Fenrir broke free of the chains that had bound him since the gods first tried to contain his fury. His jaws opened so wide they could swallow the sky, his eyes burned with fire, and with every step he shook. The world, the Midgard serpent Jörmungandr, stirred in the oceans, its coils thrashing and waves swallowing the coasts. Poison filled the waters, darkening seas and skies alike. From Helheim, the dead marched under the command of Hel herself, their ranks endless, their silence more dreadful than war cries. And from Muspelheim, Surtur, the fire giant, rose with his flaming sword, brighter than the sun, ready to set the world ablaze. At the heart of this storm of doom was Loki. Freed from his chains, his hatred sharpened by centuries of venom and pain, he became the leader of Asgard's enemies. With giants, monsters, and the restless dead at his side, Loki marched toward the final battlefield, Vigrid, the vast plain where the last struggle would unfold. Against him stood the gods, weary but unbroken, joined by the Einherjar, the fallen warriors of Valhalla, who had trained for this day across countless ages. Odin called them forth, armored and fearless, their spirits ready to die again in the last stand of creation. The clash was like no other. The sky split apart, thunder rolled like drums of war, and the ground shook beneath the tramp of armies. Odin himself rode at the front, spear in hand, ravens circling above, his one eye fixed on Fenrir, the beast destined to kill him. Thor strode to meet the serpent Jörmungandr, Mjolnir blazing with lightning in his grip. Freyr faced Surtur, though he no longer had his magic sword, having given it away in a moment of passion long before. Heimdall and Loki, sworn enemies, sought each other amid the chaos, their hatred destined to end in blood. When Odin met Fenrir, the sky seemed to fall silent. The All-Father struck with Gungnir, but the wolf's strength was too great. With a terrible snap of his jaws, Fenrir swallowed Odin whole. The gods cried out in despair, but vengeance came swiftly. Vidar, Odin's silent son, strode forward. Upon his foot was the great shoe crafted from the scraps of leather men had discarded, for centuries tougher than any weapon. He drove it into Fenrir's jaw, pried the beast's mouth wide, and with his strength tore the wolf apart. Odin was avenged, but the loss could not be undone. Meanwhile, Thor faced his old foe, Jörmungandr. Their battle shook mountains and churned. Seas, thunder roared, lightning split the heavens, and waves rose higher than mountains. Thor struck with Mjolnir again and again, until at last the serpent fell, crushed and broken. Yet even in death, Jörmungandr had his vengeance. He spewed forth a final flood of venom, and Thor, though victorious, staggered 9 steps before collapsing. The defender of humanity lay dead, his hammer falling silent at his side. Elsewhere, Freyr fought valiantly against Surtur. Without his sword, he could not match the fire giant's fury. Surtur's blade blazed brighter than the sun, and with one terrible strike, Freyr fell, his blood feeding the flames. Surtur roared in triumph, and his fire spread unchecked, consuming forests, mountains, and seas. Loki and Heimdall met in their fated duel. 2 tricksters in their own way, bound by enmity. They fought fiercely, each landing fatal blows. When they fell, it was together, their hatred ending only in mutual destruction. One by one, the gods and their allies were cut down. Tyr, god of war and justice, fell battling Garm, the hound of hell. Giants and warriors alike perished, their cries drowned out by the roar of fire and the crash of waves. At last, when all seemed lost, Surtur swung his flaming sword wide, and fire engulfed the world. Asgard's golden halls melted, Midgard's fields burned, the seas boiled, and Yggdrasil itself trembled as if about to collapse. Flames devoured everything, leaving only ash and smoke. Yet even as the world perished, the prophecy spoke of renewal. When the fire faded and the oceans receded, a new world would rise from the waters. Green fields would grow again, untouched by flame. 2 humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, hidden during the chaos, would emerge to repopulate Midgard. Some gods too would return. Baldur, once slain, would walk again in the sunlight. The cycle of death and rebirth would begin anew, as it had before, as it would again. For Ragnarok was not only an end, but a beginning. The tale of Ragnarok was not meant as despair, but as truth. It showed that even gods must bow to fate, that strength, wisdom, and courage could not prevent what was destined. Yet it also showed that destruction is not final, that from ashes comes life. For the Norse, this was no simple story of doom. It was a reminder that everything has its time, that even the mightiest fall, and that renewal follows ruin. When the flames of Surtur faded and the waves of the sea fell still, silence covered the world. The 9 realms, once filled with gods, giants, and men, lay in ruins. Ash and water covered everything, and the mighty tree Yggdrasil trembled as if it too had endured the weight of destruction. Ragnarok had come as foretold, sweeping away gods and monsters alike, ending the age of Asgard's glory. Yet from the silence, the stories did not end. In Norse belief, endings were never only endings, they were also beginnings. From the ashes, new life stirred, and from the death of the old gods, new hope rose like green shoots through blackened earth. In this renewal, Baldur, the god of light, returned from Hel's shadowy halls. He walked once more in the sunlight, his presence bringing joy to the world just as it had before. His resurrection symbolized more than survival. It was proof that innocence and goodness could never be extinguished forever. Alongside him came Hodr, the blind brother who had unknowingly struck him down, now reconciled, both gods walking together in peace. In Midgard, life too was restored. Two humans, Lif and Lifthrasir, had hidden in the shelter of Yggdrasil's roots during the chaos, drinking morning dew to survive. When the fires and floods receded, they emerged, stepping into a cleansed earth. From them would come the next generations of humankind, destined to repopulate the world. In this rebirth, the Norse saw the eternal cycle, destruction feeding creation, death making room for new life. The legacy of these myths was not simply about gods or monsters. They were about how people understood themselves and their place in the universe. The Norse knew life was fragile, that storms could take a ship, disease could claim a village, or war could erase a kingdom. But they also believed that courage and honor gave meaning even in the face of inevitable loss. Ragnarok was terrifying, but it was also inspiring. It told them that even when doom was certain, one must still rise, still fight, still face the storm with pride. Odin knew he would fall to Fenrir, and Thor knew Jörmungandr's venom would kill him, yet they fought all the same. That lesson, that honor lies in the struggle, not the outcome, was the true gift of Norse mythology. Through centuries, these stories survived. Carved in runes, sung by skalds, and whispered around firelight, they crossed oceans and generations. When Icelandic poets wrote them down in the Eddas, they preserved not only myths, but the very heart of a culture. Those texts became a bridge, carrying Viking belief across 1,000 years to us today. From them we see not only how the Norse imagined gods and giants, but how they saw themselves, fearless, flawed, yet unyielding. Their myths were not polished tales of perfection, but raw stories of struggle, sacrifice, betrayal, and redemption. That honesty gave them power, for it reflected life as it was lived. Even in modern times, these legends burn brightly. Thor swings his hammer not only in sagas, but in stories told on cinema screens. Loki's trickery delights audiences in books and shows, his complexity proving timeless. Odin's wisdom inspires countless portrayals of the wise old wanderer, the one-eyed sage who sacrifices to learn. Baldur's beauty, Hel's shadowy calm, Surtur's blazing sword, all remain alive in new retellings, their images reshaped, yet their essence unchanged. Writers like J.R.R. Tolkien drew heavily from Norse myth, filling Middle-earth with echoes of Sigurd's cursed ring, dwarven forges, and elven realms. Modern video games allow players to stand alongside gods or fight beasts of legend, carrying Viking myth into new generations of imagination. Even the names of days remind us of the Norse pantheon, Thursday, Thor's Day, quietly marking the thunder god each week. But beyond their presence in culture, the myths continue to resonate because of their timeless truths. They speak of courage in the face of despair, the cost of wisdom, the danger of greed, the balance between chaos and order. Sigurd shows us that even great heroes can be undone by cursed ambition. Ragnar reminds us that glory and defiance outlive, even death in a serpent's pit. Odin teaches that knowledge is never free, that sacrifice is required for true power. Thor embodies the duty to protect, to fight even when the battle cannot be won. And Ragnarok itself reminds us that everything has an end. But from that end, renewal comes. To the Norse, life was not guaranteed, nor was it gentle. The sea could claim a ship without warning. A winter storm could starve a family. Enemies could descend at dawn. Yet their myths told them not to despair. Even when the world itself burned, life would find a way back. Even when gods fell, new ones would rise. The cycle of loss and renewal was eternal, and within it, courage was the greatest virtue. To face life without fear, to die with honor, to live in such a way that one's name would be remembered, that was true immortality. And so, the stories lived on. They were told not just to explain the world, but to inspire those who lived within it. Around longhouse fires, skalds spoke of Thor's thunderous battles, of Odin's secret wanderings, of Loki's treacherous tricks. They sang of Baldur's fall, of Sigurd's cursed gold, of Ragnar's daring raids. Children grew up listening to these tales, learning what it meant to be brave, to endure, to laugh, even when doom drew near. The myths shaped not only belief, but identity, binding communities together with a shared vision of courage and fate. Though centuries have passed since Viking ships sailed, the myths remain. They are carried in books, in films, in games, in language itself. They survive because they speak to something eternal in us, the recognition that life is fragile, fate is relentless, and yet we can meet it with strength. Ragnarok is not simply the doom of gods long gone. It is the reminder that endings are part of beginnings, that courage matters even when defeat is certain, that the stories we leave behind are the true measure of immortality. Thus, the legacy of Norse mythology endures. It is not locked in the past, but alive in every retelling, every echo of thunder, every story of courage told to inspire the next generation. Ragnarok's flames may have consumed the old world, but from them new stories rose, and from those stories we still draw meaning. To remember Odin, Thor, Freya, Baldur, Loki, Sigurd, and Ragnar is to keep alive the spirit of a people who face the harshness of life with laughter, bravery, and defiance. The gods may have fallen, but their stories live forever. The gods may have fallen, but their stories live forever. If you want more legends like this, stay with us, because the next tale is already waiting and you don't want to miss it.